orphans and vulnerable children face seemingly insurmountable odds. It's a big problem. An estimated 18 million children worldwide have lost both parents. And that number is conservative because it doesn't account for children whose parents are unable to care for them. In fact, 76% of children in the US foster care system are removed from their homes for preventable, poverty-related issues. And the impact of a family's instability lingers long into adulthood. In the US alone, 50% of the homeless, 60% of child sex trafficking victims, and over 75% of the prison population spent time at some point in foster care. If children are not supported and surrounded by a loving family today, how will they obtain a healthy and stable life in the future? When you look at it, this is a seemingly insurmountable problem that plagues our society. And yet there's hope when we get involved, especially for those of us who know the father to the fatherless. This issue became personal to my wife, Heather, and me, really through the back door of infertility. For years, we desired to have children biologically, and God was not answering in the way that we hoped. And during that process, God opened our eyes to the need for children who don't have families. And I remember the first step we took was just talking with another family who had walked down that road. And the more we talked with them, the more we started to see maybe this is a road God was leading us on. And I think I would have said at the very beginning, this is second best. Since we can't have children biologically, we'll adopt. But we learned real quick that adoption is just as best. As God led us on a route that we never could have planned, but just taking one step after another, and all of a sudden we found ourselves in Kazakhstan, adopting a little boy, 10 months old, into our family, who changed our lives. Now the story got interesting after that because we got back from Kazakhstan and 2 weeks later, my wife was pregnant. And so 9 months later, another child came along. We obviously knew at that point we were able to have children biologically, but we knew we wanted to adopt again as well. So we started the process, actually a really hard process that led to an adoption falling through. That then redirected us to adopt our daughter. And as soon as we adopted her, 3 months later, you'll never guess what happened. My wife was pregnant again, and our fourth child, second biological, came along. And we were joyfully content with our 4 children until years later. My wife and I were sitting at the dinner table on a date night. We hadn't even planned on talking about adoption, but we'd just gotten back from a trip where we had been overseas in a really hard location where we were around a lot of kids who didn't have families. Orphans are easier to forget until you know their names and until you see their faces and you hold them in your arms. And once you do that, everything changes. And there on our date night that night, it was like the Lord met us at the table. And by the end of the meal, we were walking out hand in hand, ready to start the process again. And I could tell you a lot of details that flowed from that process, and then another process that came about just from us both reading Psalm 127 in our Bible reading one day. I guess the point of this story is, once you take one step and you open your life up to God, how can I be a reflection of you as father to the fatherless? He'll lead the next step and the next step and the next step. I'm not assuming He'll lead all of us to adopt or all of us to foster, but He has clearly called all of us as His church to be a part of caring for children in need. This is actually religion that is pure and undefiled before God, our Father. I sit around the dinner table now and I'm blown away. Years ago, I never could have fathomed looking around at 6 kids from all kinds of different backgrounds whom God has formed in our family in a way beyond what I could have fathomed. And I submit that when you and I take those first steps in the face of the world's greatest problems, He will write stories far beyond what you and I can fathom.